Hello and welcome to Fast Effect. We are back at the tables every Wednesday and Friday here at ELD's Time Vault Games. We will have plenty of footage to do commentary on in-store play every Wednesday and Friday at 7, online every Wednesday and Friday at 6:45. And we're going to have those ELD Opens starting very soon. We've got a Birds of Paradise for Nick. Oh, is this mirrored? This is actually flipped. Let's see what this is. I believe we've got these backwards. Nick on Death's Shadow is going to be on the golden playmat. And leading out with that Birds of Paradise. So a little bit of troubleshooting to be done here. Bit of a glare issue too, though. Overall, very happy with the quality with this new camera setup. Delver of Secrets flipping. Narset sleeves. There's the insect, and he does not love squaring off against Baleful Strix. Street Wraith cycling. Now there's an Underground Sea on the other side, so if Street Wraith does get reanimated, that'll be difficult to block. Then on Aluren here, makes great use of Euro and Baleful Strix when combined with Cavern Harpy. Literally draw as many cards as he needs to get the win. Though Baleful Strix, you are limited by your life. Euro is the stronger option when you have the Aluren out. Wasteland has taken out his Underground Sea, but a Swamp replaces it, and now Force of Will. Ponder for Ben. Some type of removal or additional threat. Can't just stare at this Baleful Strix all day. Death Shadow trades off its life for a tempo advantage. Doesn't do you any good if you just dwindle your own life total and can't convert that into an early win. Stocked Graveyard, so Gurmag Angler is another possible threat. Street Wraith cycles again. We don't have a life total on. So I believe I've got a solution for that. So Baleful Strix does trade with this Delver of Secrets. But Ben, however, no follow-up. Now Recruiter of the Guard. Oh, and he's got the days for it. Very nice. So he's had Wasteland and now Days, taking advantage of the lack of mana. Euro draws a card, gains some life, but is not able to put a land into play. Gonna need to get to 4 mana eventually for the Aluren. Might be nice to get to 5 just so you're not getting stuffed by another Days. Delver of Secrets. And passing the turn. Delver does flip. Now a Brainstorm. Delver turns sideways, and then a Thoughtseize. What is this? That Quickling, I think? I think that might be like a 2-power creature. Life total off camera. It's taking a ton of damage. Got to be in single digits here. I mean, all the Street Wraiths, Thoughtseizes, Fetches, Force, Shocks. Abrupt Decay. Ben, I think this is actually Ben's first tournament. I think I heard someone saying that. Very ready. The Force of Will, the Abrupt Decay. Uh, Ben pointing out that it cannot be countered. Force of Will can give you that sense of security, but not against Abrupt Decay. It's a handful of cards that can't touch. That's why they're played. About the only other ones I can think of off the top of my head are things like Croson Grip and Sudden Shock, things with Split Second, and then, of course, probably the one I've gotten the most people with is Supreme Verdict. There's a lot of control matchups that I've won with Supreme Verdict. Just either actual Delver decks or kind of mid-range decks where they've sculpted their hand to have counter spells and feel like there's no way they can possibly lose. They're ahead on board, and they've converted all of their cantrips into cards to hold on to that lead and then just completely blow them out of the water with a Supreme Verdict, and they're just left with some Force of Wills, and they just have to start throwing those at your creatures, which feels awful. You're throwing out something like a Snapcaster Mage, and they have to force getting 2-for-1s. They can't do that all day. You could definitely use Force of Wills to stop like a Terminus or some type of sweeper, but you have to stop every single card because you have literally no board presence left. That's a tough spot to be in as a control deck. Now, both of these decks running Force of Will. Aluren has the ability to beat down, as we just saw, but for the most part, it does want a combo. And for those unfamiliar, Cavern Harpy is really one of the main parts of the engine. It's a creature from Plane Shift. Didn't seem like that big a deal when it was printed, but it has a lot of combo potential. You can pay 1 life to return it to its hand, and when it enters the battlefield, you have to return a black or blue creature to your hand. And what that ends up doing is bouncing a creature that can draw cards like Euro or Baleful Strix or Ice Fang Codal. And from there, you're going to be able to now pay a life to draw a card, which is like a build your own Yawgmoth's Bargain. Of course, if you have Euro, you're gaining 3 life as well, so you're actually netting 2 life every time you do the cycle, which is pretty brutal. Now, we've got a turn 1 Delver of Secrets, the ideal opening for any Delver deck. Oh no, Ben missed the flip. Perhaps a little flustered that the Delvers weren't flipped back. That's something you don't have to do in Magic Online. And I may be getting people's names wrong. As I mentioned, the marquee is Switch. It's surprising to me looking at the camera setup. Double fetch. Just yawned. It's 11:34 here in the evening. Just wrapped up our Wednesday Night Legacy, but I really wanted to get one of these in. See how clear the footage is. Abrupt Decay takes out Delver of Secrets. No protesting that. And now Baleful Strix. This is a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of card. Birds of Paradise. Then choosing to pick up the Watery Grave, saving his fetch lands. Yeah, probably would have been better to just hard cast the Daze, given that he's got this Watery Grave coming into play tapped during the end step. Assume he doesn't actually want to play a Watery Grave. Wasteland takes out one of Nick's mana sources, but got a Birds of Paradise, and Baleful Strix actually turning sideways. It's a little bit of a decision playing against Death Shadow. I think at this point, Aluren can assume that it's best to not get too fancy and just go for the throat. Baleful Strix chipping away at a Death Shadow player's life total, often not worth it. You're potentially just growing Death Shadow and giving them the chance to take you out over the course of like 2 turns. But that said, Baleful Strix should, in theory, be able to pump the brakes and just stop turning sideways if Death Shadow does become too much of a liability. There is an immunity to Snuff Out, given that it's got that black mana in its symbol. Saw the Snuff Out taking out the Birds of Paradise. Death Deck, wow, it is late here. I will say that Death Shadow, I think, could experiment with Grief. I would really like to try that out, running Grief with more Reanimates, like 4 Grief, 4 Reanimate. And at that point, you're talking about a turn 1 Delver, 4 Grief, 4 Street Wraith a huge percentage of the time. And I don't know how many decks are really going to beat a good Delver deck after it thought seizes you twice or unmasks you twice on that first turn. This seems really, really strong. That is something that I would be trying to do were I playing very competitively right now. I feel like that might actually be my go-to, would be Death Shadow with 4 Griefs. It's also possible that Reanimator will just really enjoy the ability to have that super easy reanimation target, but it's also possible that the reanimates are going to be too high value in that deck to reanimate such a small creature. Want to be hitting something like a Gristlebrand. Death Shadow, ready to do battle. Birds of Paradise. Abrupt Decay takes out the Death Shadow. All of us wondering why Baleful Strix continued to push forward. And now Teferi gets a Force of Will. Now or never with that Force. Once Teferi hits, your counter spells are going to get completely shut off. And with a Baleful Strix on board, it's going to be difficult to actually get in there and hit the Teferi as well. Brainstorm. Death Shadow continues to dig. Really is one of my favorite cards in the game. Just the ability to convert a garbage hand to something that can continue the fight. I mean, you can have literally just like 2 bad top decks and then you draw a Brainstorm. You can just cash those in for the best cards on top of your library. Start to sculpt and find your way back into the game. It's that type of card selection that just leads to some different branches of trees. Even good players will play very differently. All 4 Watery Graves out. Death Shadow. This is a deck that you can run without revised dual lands. not optimal. It's not like it's better without Underground Sea, but there are many games where you don't need Underground Sea. I'll say that. It is nice, however, to occasionally be able to use Underground Sea, and oh, just like that, then able to steal that. So no Allurens at all. That is crazy. Just beating down and taking advantage of Death Shadow's lower life total. Got a little too low, slightly out of hand, and I think it's one of the more fun decks to play. It's very, very challenging, and congrats to Nick for stepping up and playing in live events. I hope he continues with Death Shadow. As someone that's played a ton of tournaments, I mean, there were tournaments where I didn't drop a single game with Death Shadow, and I'd still look back and in pretty much every match, feel like there were several areas where I just don't know what the right play was. It is not a given. There are a lot of times, especially as a combo player, where you just kind of there's optimal lines, like just straight up, like there's not really debating certain situations. I feel like those are kind of few and far between with Death Shadow. You can really play at varying speeds. Your every resource is at play. Cards in hand are always a decision, but now you're talking about life total for everything, which land you fetch, how much life you use, and how much you prioritize committing to the board, the number of threats that you commit to the board. So many different ways you can play it. So, well, that is it. I just wanted to get one of these videos done. We're not going to have the normal outro because this is on a new machine, but I hope you enjoyed this new setup, and I'm looking forward to your feedback on it. Thanks for watching.